What is some of the manufacturing process that goes into a nuclear reactor? Is this one of those situations where it's like just kind of a bunch of normal parts that come together to make something exciting? Or is there something inherently like tricky about the manufacturing process?
There are special materials, special processes, special codes you have to conform to. And then obviously procuring nuclear fuel is not the same thing as procuring oil and gas. There are differences. And I think it's also worth mentioning there's a bunch of kind of questions that will have to unfold over the coming decades as these things become more prevalent. So one thing is the operation model. So will you be forced to have a certain number of operators at each microreactor, or will you be able to have maybe a slightly centralized one who monitors a number of reactors in a certain area, or one central monitoring location for a whole country? So there's things like that. Also, safety and security. What can you do around the design of the reactor or personnel to like simplify that a little bit? Because there's some things that, if you require too many people to operate or maintain the security of these things, it could ruin the economics. So there's things like that as well, beyond just the manufacturing.
Which we have some of today, right? I don't know what your opinion on the necessity of this is, but there's like the security overhead of nuclear reactors, of like just teams of armed guards standing outside them at all times, like whether or not that's actually like adds to the net safety. There's all kinds of stuff like that today that is, whether it's an overreach or not, part of the regulatory burden that nuclear carries that oil and gas doesn't necessarily. And I imagine part of that is because oil and gas has a really large lobbying budget and nuclear does not yet, because it doesn't have the same like scale of industry, which is another little like catch-22. So it's hard to exert your opinion on Capitol Hill when you don't have any money to do it and other people do.
There should be a way to make this work. And I think you're right, to some extent, it would come down to lobbying. I think there are also special requirements that nuclear has that other energy sources do not. It's a question of finding the right balance. But just in so many ways, when you think about nuclear from first principles, it really should be the cheapest energy source. If you think about all the way, like the full life cycle of this whole thing, so thinking from mining all the way through to manufacturing, to power production and operation, it uses the least raw materials. It's just insanely energy dense. One thing people don't realize is 1 barrel of uranium, for example, is roughly equivalent to 2 million barrels of oil and gas, just in broad strokes. The insane energy density should really lend itself to good economics. Obviously, some of the economics will be eaten up by the extra safety requirements and so on, but net, it really should be the best.